Hello, I'm Samant Bhatia. I'm a financial journalist. Today I'm with James Dorrington and Ken Simons, and they are two of the founding partners of ICF Consulting. Ken, James, first of all, what is ICF Consulting?
Well, actually, firstly, Samant, I'd like to thank you for helping us with our first podcast. And we started ICF Consulting on the back of the implementation at a financial services company, basically. So we implemented metric stream. We implemented 8 modules. We did it in 18 months, and we implemented it successfully, basically. So that was part of a merger-demerger transaction that they were doing in the open market. We decided to set the company up on the back of that experience, basically working with metric stream, and also in conjunction with discussions with a number of other companies that were anticipating undertaking such a journey at the time as well. We were successful, which is, I suppose, one of the reasons to start to do something like that, because you can bring success to it. But also we enable metric stream to learn as well. And they became, I suppose, our primary partner as we, set up the company, basically. So we work with a number of different GRC systems providers now as well. So I just wanted to say that as well, so that the way...
So we're talking about risk here, aren't we?
Yeah. So GRC, governance, risk and compliance. I don't know, James, if you want to say anything to clarify.
Yeah, I think what might explain that a little bit as well is the name of the company. So ICF, the initials stand for an integrated control framework. And what that means is that, lots of companies build up. They could be in financial services, which all three of us have been involved in our careers, but it could be a media company, a tech startup. You work very, very hard to build up your IP. Sometimes, some very strong capital in the company become profitable. So you've created that situation, so you need to look after it. So that's where your risk comes in.
The intellectual property we're talking about here.
Any company exists because it produces something tangible or intangible. So by virtue of its existence, you create risk in the world. So that's not always a financial risk. It's just the risk of operating. That's why we use this term, operational risk. So you have to somehow, monitor, or the common word that we use is to control that risk. So what Ken and I do is implement these systems that allow you to collect that information around risk and control, and all sort of the metrics and reporting off the back of that, so that a company knows exactly where they are with their risk profile. So that's a bit more of an explainer about what we're doing here.
I've got to be honest with you, that sounds quite difficult and quite complex.
It's not easy, yeah.
So there you are, you've set up this company which deals with risk of companies from financial to media, insurance. Why do a podcast then? Why have you brought me in, as it were? I've known Ken for many years, and it's obviously a pleasure to work with Ken again. But why a podcast?
Yeah, no, it's a decent question.
Yeah, and so I suppose it follows on from why we started the company, basically. So we were successful in what we initially did, and we've applied those practices to other GRC companies and to other clients as well. What we want to do is, I suppose, create a community around what we do, but also what other people do as well. So we want to create an interactive community. We hope that, the people that participate in it will learn and develop. It may appeal to people like us that do transformation, general GRC professionals, but also software vendors as well. So we're going to get participation through some of the partners that we work with as well. But one of the key things that we strive to do in what we do is try and draw out the value of what we're doing for the client, the client's clients, yes, and generally try and ensure that they start to derive value as soon as possible. That's one of the key things that we look to do. We also work with clients with a view that they consider their outcomes rather than the details of what they do now. You go off and you buy a shiny new piece of software. that's got, I suppose, the blood, sweat and tears of a number of past implementations, etc., wrapped in it, that has some value. We're not saying that they're all perfect, but I think that what we try, well, I don't think I know, one of the things that we've been trying and encourage our clients to do is actually think about their outcomes and challenge what they do, make sure that they're clear about what they do, because invariably there is value in the product and using the product as it comes. Those practices need to evolve, and they need to, I suppose, be broader, because I think what we want to do is try and get to a situation where there is scale and value in the GRC world. It's typically looked at an opportunity to, I suppose, avoid cost and risk and issues and all that sort of stuff. But we also see, value added to clients as a consequence of doing this. The interaction between the first and second and third line. The better understanding of risk means that products and services get better. There's lots of stuff that companies get out of doing this sort of transformation that we want to make sure that people appreciate and understand. And also, I think one of the things that we also talk about is actually trying to make GRC technology a lot more accessible to people. If we can bring the costs down, you can get this in schools and all this sort of stuff as well. So, we went into this because it is, I think, at the moment, quite an expensive undertaking, I would say, for most people. But the broader and more accessible it becomes, I think, to organisations and entities throughout the whole community, I think, the better, hopefully the world will be, to be quite frank.
So if we look at it like in the whole, in the round, you've got, you want to manage risk and your IP, you've got the software, you've got these great outcomes you want to be able to manage your risk better, but the key really is the implementation, isn't it? And that's where you guys come in, that you want to kind of de-risk the implementation in a way, make it easier.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, because I think there's part of what we do and part of the value that we bring is actually getting companies to understand the value out of it. And then the other part is trying to simplify and get clients to understand how easy it is to get value, because I think lots of risk people ponder things sometimes a bit longer than they need to. So we try and get our clients up and using part of the system within about three months. We see that as an important thing to do, because it's a broader business. The business is investing in something. It needs to get a return as soon as it can. So I think that that's generally what we try and do with people, isn't it? So
yeah, well, I think as well, to be fair to the risk audit and compliance community, they're not necessarily project managers. So that's where we think we can come in and help, because quite often firms will invest a lot of money in technology, and some of them are seen as sexier and shinier, and the word AI gets thrown about a lot than others. So when firms invest in a GRC tool, quite often the driver might be, we have to, but actually they should be able to see beyond that. So what we try and do is help. So the GRC teams involved, again, the audit, risk and compliance, are normally quite big these days. So they're often left alone to their own devices without getting the necessary project governance around it. Some firms do that better than others, I think, in our experience. So getting a firm like ICF involved just bridges that gap between kind of making the decision, selecting a vendor, getting the right people around it in terms of their knowledge, but not necessarily in terms of delivery. And we find quite often that a firm will sign a licensing contract and then not quite know what to do next. And that's where we can really help. We get things moving quite quickly, as Ken says. We've just identified, this goes back to the reason for doing the podcast and getting other people involved. We think we've identified ways to get people up and running using the system quite quickly, normally within sort of 6 to 8 weeks, or as Ken said before. And that's where we think we could sort of really add value.
I think one thing just to add to that is as well, so as a company, we have complementary skills. So we have experience of, significant transformation, from outsourcing and large restructuring programs at financial institutions and throughout other businesses. We have good competency around risk compliance, an audit and understanding the processes and the practices and the regulatory consequences around those sorts of environments, but also from an operational process and an organisational design as well. We have good, strong competencies in those sorts of areas. When we bring them together with an underpinning of, good understanding of data, a good understanding of technology, and a good understanding of reporting. So as a company, we bring those sorts of facets into our clients. And we also think that those are the key areas that an organisation, particularly when it's doing a big transformation that we're talking about, needs to have, within its arsenal, for want of a better term, to be successful.
So if I were to summarise, it's making compliance easier to implement, easier to understand, and I suppose making sure that you keep doing the compliance correctly in the future.
Correct. Yeah. And I think that what we try and do as well is get companies and our clients to understand why they're doing things. And we do appreciate that there are some nuances to what certain companies do that make them different, and we do get that. But there is a core of what all companies do that is the same, particularly in risk compliance and regulation, because it's all listed out. There are certain things that you are expected to do, and there are optimal ways of doing it, but there are nuances that clients have, and we do recognise that. But we often find, we have a number of occasions where we've gone into clients and said, why are you doing that? And the reason is, I'm doing it because such and person relies on me to do it. And then you ask that person why they're doing it, and they say, I've got no idea why they sent it to me, I'll delete it. And that is right. And what we try to do is work with clients to get them to be crystal clear about why they're doing something, because then there are different ways of doing things, and there's different ways of getting the same outcome. And when you start to look at it a lot more holistically, you can optimise things, and it makes everybody's life better. And that's part of the journey that we go on with clients.
So I think I should ask you, this is the first of hopefully many podcasts. What can we expect in future episodes?
Well, I think we'll have to see where that road leads to a little bit, I think. But I guess, we want to spend more time talking about how a firm extracts the maximum value from what they're doing. That's a term that a lot of consultants use, and it gets banded around a lot. But we hope that when we go through this journey, that people will actually understand, that they'll have a real world, tangible understanding of what that word means, rather than just sort of banding it about. We also want to sort of develop into other areas and talk about ESG and certainly the governance part of that, and also kind of, I guess, delve into some of the social stuff about how we talk about things like unconscious bias and things like that in the workplace. We want to certainly get into some of those sort of more expansive areas as we go along as well, not just dwell on GRC and operational risk and compliance and things like that, but get guests on that actually can push into some of these areas, because whether people like it or realise it or not, a lot of the stuff that we talk about now is all involved in how well a firm operates and how well it protects its value. And so, we hope to get some exciting guests on that will delve into some of those areas as well.
Yeah, I think we're looking forward to it, aren't we? So I think we've done this, out of benefit for our company, but also we do genuinely want to get, some social benefit out of this. And I think one of the things we talked about when we talked to lots of people about what we formed the company was trying to make GRC a lot more accessible to lots more companies, basically. So we're hoping that this podcast starts to simulate that sort of community, for want of a better term, that all want to strive for the same thing. And as James says, we're hoping to have some quite interesting guests on to just talk about risk in their context. But I think one of the key things that drives us is making sure that people appreciate what GRC is, and it's the value thing that I think is quite important, and we're going to spend, I think, a bit of time on that up front. Talking about value, talking about some of the business cases, and also the communication aspect. Because we spend time with clients, talking to some of the boards, with risk and compliance chiefs, to get their board and their peers to understand why the organisation would benefit from such an undertaking, basically.
So the kind of the questions which are being asked by boardrooms, you've got an idea of like the common problems people have got, and you've got some good stories to tell.
Yes, exactly, and we're hoping that will actually end up driving the episodes as they come along, rather than try to sort of predefine it up front. But absolutely.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Ken, James, thank you so much for sparing your time today and trying to explain a very, very worthwhile, if somewhat complex area to me. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for taking the time. Cheers.